We are glad to welcome you to the Lucas History Channel. Please like and subscribe if you want to see more stories like this. Enjoy your viewing. I never suspected a thing. After 10 years of marriage, 3 beautiful children, and a life filled with shared joys and struggles, I thought I knew Beth better than anyone. But trust, once shattered, reveals how fragile it truly is. It started on a Wednesday, like any other. I'd taken the morning off work to oversee the gas company's routine inspection. A short, wiry man named Frank was sent to handle it. He arrived in a branded van, wearing a friendly smile and carrying a clipboard. Beth welcomed him in as though he were an old friend, chatting about the unseasonably warm weather while I focused on getting ready to leave. As I gathered my things, I overheard their conversation. Frank was telling her how his wife made the best peach cobbler in the state. Beth laughed, a light, breezy sound that sent a faint chill down my spine. I brushed it off. She was always friendly. That was just who she was. "Thanks for staying to handle this," I told her as I grabbed my car keys. "It's no problem," she replied with a casual wave. "Frank's got it under control." I paused, catching the way she said his name, like she already knew him. I told myself I was being ridiculous and kissed her cheek before heading out. But a seed of doubt had been planted. That night, as we sat around the dinner table, everything felt normal. Beth asked about my day, laughed at Mark Jr.'s silly stories, and helped Natalie with her math homework. But beneath the surface, something felt different. Her laughter was a fraction too bright, her touch too fleeting when she brushed my arm. I couldn't explain it, but something about her felt out of sync. The next few days were uneventful, save for small moments that gnawed at me. A text she quickly hid, an unusually long trip to the store, and a newfound interest in looking presentable, even when she was just at home. The seed of doubt grew, though I tried to bury it under the weight of daily life. The following Tuesday, I came home early. I hadn't told Beth. I'd been too busy thinking about surprising her with an impromptu date night. As I stepped inside, the house was unusually quiet. "Beth?" I called out. "In here." Her voice floated from the living room, overly cheerful. I walked in to find her sitting on the couch, casually flipping through a magazine. "You're home early," she said, her smile warm but strained. "I thought we could do something together tonight," I said, holding up a bottle of her favorite wine. "Oh, that's sweet," she said, glancing at the clock. "But I already made plans to visit Lisa." She stood, her movements hurried, as if trying to shield something from my view. "Lisa, huh?" I asked, keeping my tone light despite the unease settling in my chest. "I could drop you off." "No need," she said quickly. "I'll just take the car. It's easier." She left shortly after, but I didn't buy her excuse. I called Lisa an hour later under the pretense of asking if Beth had left something behind. "Oh, I haven't seen Beth in a while," Lisa replied, her voice puzzled. My heart sank. I didn't confront Beth that night. I needed more than a gut feeling to accuse the woman I loved of something so damaging. The truth came out 2 weeks later in the most mundane of ways. I'd borrowed Beth's phone to check a recipe she'd mentioned, and when I opened the browser, I saw a thread of text from Frank G. The conversation wasn't long, but it didn't need to be. A few flirty remarks, plans to meet again, and the clincher. "Last week was amazing. Can't wait to see you tomorrow." The words hit me like a sledgehammer. Beth walked into the kitchen, freezing when she saw me holding her phone. "Mark," she said, her voice trembling. I held up the screen. "Care to explain this?" Her face went pale, her lips forming words she couldn't say. Finally she stammered, "It's not what it looks like." "It's exactly what it looks like," I replied, my voice shaking with rage and hurt. "How long has this been going on?" She didn't answer immediately, her eyes darting around the room as if searching for an escape. "It was a mistake," she whispered. "Just once." "A mistake you're repeating tomorrow?" I demanded. My voice cracked despite my attempt to stay composed. Tears filled her eyes. "It doesn't mean anything, Mark. He's just different. He made me feel." "Don't you dare finish that sentence," I interrupted. "You've always been my everything. Our family has been my world. But clearly, that wasn't enough for you." Beth crumpled into a chair, her tears spilling over. "I don't know why I did it. I didn't mean to hurt you." "You didn't mean to hurt me," I repeated, incredulous. "What did you think would happen? That we'd carry on like nothing happened?" For the first time in our marriage, I felt truly alone. Everything I thought I knew about Beth, about us, was a lie. I stood there, staring at her, my mind a whirl of emotions: anger, pain, disbelief, and, worst of all, love. The betrayal cut deep, but so did the realization that some part of me still wanted to fight for her. For us. Beth sobbed quietly, her face buried in her hands, but her tears only deepened the chasm between us. I stood frozen, clutching the edge of the counter to steady myself. My mind screamed for answers, but I couldn't find the strength to ask the questions. The silence stretched painfully long, broken only by her shallow, uneven breaths. Finally, I found my voice. "How did we get here, Beth? What wasn't I giving you?" Her head snapped up, her eyes red and swollen. "It's not about you, Mark. You've been perfect. You always are. But that's the problem." I frowned, struggling to process her words. "What does that even mean? Being a good husband is a problem." "It's just, sometimes, I feel like I've disappeared," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm not Beth anymore. I'm just your wife, or Natalie's mom, or Mrs. Johnson. Frank," she winced, clearly ashamed. "Frank saw me. He reminded me what it feels like to be wanted." The sting of her words was like a whip crack. "You think I don't want you?" I asked, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "Every day, I show you I love you. Every day, I put you and the kids first. And you repay me by sneaking around with a stranger?" She flinched, but I didn't let up. "Do you have any idea what this is going to do to our family? To our kids?" Her face crumpled. "I wasn't thinking about that. I wasn't thinking at all. It just happened." "Nothing just happens, Beth," I shot back. "You made a choice that destroyed everything we've built." She broke down completely then, her sobs racking her small frame. I wanted to feel sympathy, to comfort her, but I couldn't. Not after what she'd done. "I'll end it," she said through her tears. "I'll never see him again, Mark. Please just don't leave me. Don't give up on us." I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to. But trust, once broken, doesn't come back with promises. "It's not that simple," I said, my voice hollow. "You didn't just hurt me, Beth. You broke something in me I don't know how to fix." For the rest of the night, we barely spoke. I slept, or tried to, in the guest room, the ghost of her betrayal looming over me. The next morning, I left early, telling Beth I needed time to think. I didn't tell her where I was going, and she didn't ask. The drive was aimless at first, the road stretching endlessly ahead, as my mind replayed the last 12 hours in painful detail. Eventually, I found myself parked outside the diner where I used to take Beth on dates when we were young and stupidly in love. Back then, our biggest problems were figuring out how to split a milkshake and whether we'd get caught kissing in her parents' driveway. I ordered coffee and sat at the same booth where we'd laughed and dreamed about our future. Now, those dreams felt like cruel jokes, mocking the man I'd become, a husband whose wife needed someone else to feel alive. My phone buzzed on the table, pulling me from my thoughts. It was Beth. I ignored the call, but she left a voicemail. Her voice, trembling and raw, came through the speaker. "Mark, please talk to me. I know I hurt you, but I swear I'll do whatever it takes to fix this. I love you. I love our family. Don't let one mistake ruin everything." One mistake. She kept calling it that, as if reducing it to a single word could lessen the damage. I deleted the voicemail without responding. By the time I got home that evening, Beth was waiting in the living room. She looked exhausted, her hair disheveled and her eyes puffy from crying. "I called Frank," she said, standing as I entered. "It's over. I told him I made a mistake and that I never want to see him again." I leaned against the doorway, crossing my arms. "And what did he say?" She hesitated. "He said he understood, that he didn't want to cause me any more pain." I laughed bitterly. "How noble of him." Beth flinched but pressed on. "Mark, I know I can't take back what I've done, but I'm begging you, please give me another chance. Let me prove to you that I'm still the woman you fell in love with." Her words tugged at something deep inside me, the part that still loved her despite everything. But love wasn't the issue. Trust was. "I don't know if I can," I admitted, my voice breaking. "I don't know if I'll ever look at you the same way again." Beth stepped closer, her hands trembling as she reached for mine. "Then let me earn it back. Whatever it takes, Mark. Just don't give up on me. On us." I wanted to pull away, but something stopped me. Maybe it was the desperation in her voice, or the memory of the life we'd built together. Or maybe it was the hope, foolish as it might be, that we could find our way back to each other. For days, I grappled with my decision. Beth hovered at the edges of my life, trying to reach me but never pushing too hard, as though afraid to shatter what little remained of our bond. I caught her wiping tears when she thought I wasn't looking, cleaning obsessively, and doting on the kids with a renewed intensity. It was clear she was trying, but trying didn't erase the pain. One evening, after putting the kids to bed, she approached me cautiously. I was sitting in the living room, staring blankly at the muted TV. "Mark," she said softly, her voice trembling, "can we talk?" I gestured for her to sit, though my chest tightened at the thought of dredging up everything again. She perched on the edge of the couch, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "I've made an appointment with a therapist," she began, her words hesitant. "For myself. And for us, if you're willing. I need to understand why I did what I did. I can't move forward without facing it." I studied her, looking for signs of insincerity, but all I saw was a woman desperate to fix the mess she created. "Why now?" I asked. "Why not before any of this happened?" Her eyes brimmed with tears. "Because I was selfish, Mark. I didn't see the cracks in myself until it was too late. But I see them now. And I'll do whatever it takes to make this right." Her words stirred something inside me, though I couldn't decide if it was hope or exhaustion. "Therapy's not a magic fix," I said. "It's not going to make me forget what happened." "I know," she said quickly. "But maybe it can help us understand each other again. Maybe it can help you decide if we have a future." The first therapy session was uncomfortable. Beth poured out her guilt, admitting to feelings of inadequacy and a need for validation she couldn't explain. "I felt invisible," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Not because of you, Mark, but because of me. I stopped seeing myself as anything more than a wife and mother. Frank, he made me feel seen, even if it was wrong." Her confession was raw, but it didn't absolve her. I listened, my heart heavy, but my mind refused to accept her justification. The therapist turned to me. "Mark, how do you feel hearing this?" I hesitated, struggling to articulate the storm inside me. "I feel like I've been living a lie." I thought we were happy, that we had everything. But now, I don't know what's real anymore. That's a natural response to betrayal, the therapist said gently. Trust isn't rebuilt overnight, but it can be rebuilt if both parties are committed. I glanced at Beth. She looked so small, so broken. A part of me hated her for what she'd done, but another part, buried deep, wanted to believe we could salvage something from the wreckage. Over the next few weeks, we continued therapy, navigating a minefield of emotions. Beth worked tirelessly to regain my trust, being open about her movements, her thoughts, and even her fears. She avoided Frank entirely, even going so far as to switch service providers to ensure we'd never see him again. But trust is a fragile thing. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the kids play, I asked the question that had haunted me from the beginning. Why didn't you come to me, Beth? Why didn't you tell me how you felt before turning to someone else? She stared at her hands, her voice barely audible. I didn't want to burden you. You already do so much for us. I thought I could handle it on my own. I shook my head, my frustration bubbling to the surface. Marriage isn't about handling things alone. It's about handling them together. How could you not see that? She reached for my hand, her touch hesitant. I see it now, Mark. I see everything I threw away. And I'll spend the rest of my life proving that I'm worth your forgiveness, if you can ever give it. I didn't pull away, but I didn't respond either. The truth was, I didn't know if forgiveness was possible. Every time I looked at her, I saw the woman I loved, but I also saw the man she'd chosen over me, even if just for a moment. One night, as I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, I thought about our children. They were the one thing that tethered me to this life, to this house, to Beth. They deserved a stable home, two parents who loved them. But could I stay for them alone? Would that be fair to any of us? Beth stirred beside me, her hand brushing mine in her sleep. For the first time in weeks, I didn't pull away. I lay there, listening to her soft breaths, and wondered if love, true, enduring love, could really survive something like this. Time passed, but the wounds remained. Therapy sessions became a routine, a place where we peeled back layers of pain and longing, uncovering truths we'd avoided for years. Some days, I left feeling lighter, like we were making progress. Other days, the weight of betrayal crushed any sense of hope. Beth was relentless in her efforts to mend our marriage. She arranged weekly date nights, cooked my favorite meals, and left handwritten notes on my nightstand, filled with apologies and declarations of love. She was trying, no doubt about it, but each gesture felt like a bandage over a wound that refused to heal. One Saturday morning, while the kids played in the backyard, Beth found me in the garage. I was fixing Natalie's bike, a project I'd thrown myself into to keep my hands busy and my mind quiet. Mark, she said, standing hesitantly in the doorway. Can we talk? I didn't look up. What's on your mind? She took a few steps closer, fidgeting with the hem of her sweater. I've been thinking about what you said in therapy last week. About feeling like you don't know what's real anymore. I paused, tightening a bolt on the bike. And? I want to give you something, she said, holding out a small notebook. I've been writing in it every day. My thoughts, my regrets, my hopes for us. I thought maybe it could help you see how much this marriage means to me. I stared at the notebook, unsure whether to accept it. Finally, I took it from her hands, flipping through a few pages. The entries were raw, filled with confessions of self-doubt, memories of happier times, and promises to be better. I don't know if this will change anything, I said, setting the notebook on the workbench. But I'll read it. Beth nodded, her eyes glistening with tears. Thank you, she whispered before leaving me alone. That night, after the kids were asleep, I sat in bed and opened the notebook. Her words were painfully honest, detailing her struggles with insecurity and her misguided attempts to fill the void she couldn't explain. One entry stood out. I never stopped loving Mark. Not for a second. But I let my selfishness blind me to what I already had. I thought I needed something new, something thrilling, but the truth is, I was running from myself. I don't deserve his forgiveness, but I'll keep fighting for it because he's worth it. We're worth it. The words stirred something inside me, though they didn't erase the hurt. Still, I closed the notebook feeling a flicker of something I hadn't felt in weeks, the faintest glimmer of hope. A few days later, a phone call shattered the fragile balance we'd managed to build. It was Frank. Beth answered while I was in the kitchen. I couldn't hear his words, but I recognized his voice immediately. Beth's face drained of color as she glanced at me, her hand tightening on the phone. I told you it's over, she said, her voice barely audible. Please don't call me again. She hung up quickly, but the damage was done. I set down the dish I was washing and turned to her. What did he want? Her hands trembled as she placed the phone on the counter. He said he wanted closure. That he needed to hear from me one last time. Closure? I echoed, my voice cold. Does he think he's the victim in all this? I don't know, she said, tears welling up. I didn't want to talk to him, Mark. I swear. The anger I kept buried for weeks boiled to the surface. Do you have any idea what it feels like to know he can still reach you? That he has the audacity to think he has a claim on you? Beth stepped closer, her expression pleading. He doesn't, Mark. I told him it's over. I'll block his number if that's what it takes. Please don't let this undo everything we've been working toward. I turned away, my chest heaving with the weight of my emotions. It's not just about him, Beth. It's about us. About whether I can ever trust you again. Her silence was deafening. That night, I slept in the guest room again. The house felt colder than ever, the walls closing in as I lay awake, grappling with a decision I couldn't avoid forever. The next morning, as I prepared to leave for work, Beth stood at the door, her face pale and drawn. Mark, she said, her voice shaking, I'll do whatever it takes to prove to you that I'm committed to this marriage. But I need to know if you still see a future for us. I looked at her, the woman I'd loved for over a decade, the mother of my children, and the person who'd hurt me more deeply than I thought possible. I don't know, I admitted. But I'm still here. For now. Her shoulders sagged with a mix of relief and despair. That's all I can ask. As I drove to work, her words echoed in my mind. For now. It wasn't much, but it was something. A thread to cling to in the wreckage of what we'd once been. Weeks turned into months. Beth and I continued therapy, holding on to what little remained of our marriage. She threw herself into mending our relationship, but for every step forward, the specter of her betrayal pulled us 2 steps back. Trust, like glass, doesn't just crack, it shatters. And no matter how carefully you piece it back together, the fractures remain. One evening, after the kids had gone to bed, I called her into the living room. She approached cautiously, as though sensing the weight of what I was about to say. Beth, I began, my voice steady but heavy. We need to talk about where this is going. She sat across from me, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Okay. I've been thinking a lot about us, I continued. About what we've been through, what we've lost, and whether we can ever get back to what we had. Her eyes glistened with tears, but she didn't interrupt. I've tried, Beth. I really have, I said. But every time I look at you, I see him. I hear his voice. I feel the knife in my back all over again. I don't know how to move past that. She wiped at her tears, her voice trembling. I know I hurt you, Mark. More than I can ever make up for. But I love you. I love our family. Please don't give up on us. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what I had to say. I'm not giving up on our family. But I think we need to stop pretending that everything can go back to the way it was. Some things can't be undone. Beth's face crumpled as the meaning of my words sank in. You're saying you want a divorce? I'm saying I need to heal, I said. And I can't do that while I'm constantly reminded of what happened. Maybe time apart will help us figure out what we really want, whether we can rebuild or if it's better to move on. Her sobs broke the silence, each one a dagger to my resolve. What about the kids? She choked out. What will we tell them? We'll tell them the truth in a way they can understand, I said. That we both love them more than anything, and that this isn't their fault. She covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking. I wanted to comfort her, to tell her everything would be okay, but that would have been a lie. And lies were what had brought us here. The next few weeks were a blur of painful conversations and logistical planning. We sat down with Natalie, Emma, and Mark Jr., explaining as gently as we could that their mom and dad needed some time apart. Natalie, at 9, was old enough to sense the deeper currents of what was happening. Her questions pierced my heart in ways Beth's betrayal never could. Are you and Mom going to stop loving each other? She asked one evening as I tucked her into bed. I hesitated, choosing my words carefully. We still care about each other, sweetie. But sometimes, even people who love each other need space to figure things out. Her brow furrowed, and she hugged her stuffed rabbit tighter. Will you still love us? Always, I said without hesitation, leaning down to kiss her forehead. Nothing will ever change that. Beth moved into her sister's house temporarily, giving us both the breathing room we desperately needed. The house felt emptier without her, but it also felt lighter, free from the constant tension that had lingered like a storm cloud. For the first time in months, I felt like I could think clearly. I threw myself into my work, spent more time with the kids, and started going to therapy on my own. Slowly, I began to rebuild myself, not as Beth's husband, but as Mark, a man figuring out who he was outside of the relationship that had defined him for so long. Beth and I still talked, mostly about the kids, but our conversations were tentative, careful, like we were walking on eggshells. She continued therapy as well, telling me during one particularly emotional phone call that she was starting to understand the depth of her mistakes. I don't know if I'll ever forgive myself, she said, but I'll keep hoping that someday you might. Months turned into a year. By then, we'd settled into a rhythm of co-parenting, and the raw edges of our pain had softened into scars. We met one evening at a park to watch the kids play, sitting side by side on a weathered bench. I never wanted it to end like this, Beth said, breaking the silence. Neither did I admitted. But maybe it's for the best. She nodded, though tears glistened in her eyes. Do you think you'll ever trust someone again? I thought about it for a long moment. Maybe, but I think I need to learn to trust myself first. She smiled faintly, her gaze following the kids as they laughed and chased each other across the playground. You're a good dad, Mark. They're lucky to have you. So are you, I said, surprising myself with the sincerity of the words. We sat there in silence after that, watching our children, the last unbroken piece of the life we'd once shared. It wasn't the ending I'd imagined when I married Beth all those years ago. But it was an ending, and with it came the promise of a new beginning, for both of us. The story ends here, where love, betrayal, and forgiveness intertwine with life's relentless march forward. Let me know if you'd like to revisit any part of the tale, or explore what lies beyond for these characters. Thank you for watching to the end. Write in the comments what you liked, and what you would like to see next.